They say a mother's love never fades. Maybe that's true. But what they don't tell you is, sometimes, love is not enough to be treated like a human being. I was a mother before I was anything else. I gave my son, Mark, everything. My time, my energy, my years, my dreams. I carried him in my arms when my husband passed away. I was the reason he had a home, an education, a future. But on the day he betrayed me, none of that mattered. That morning began like any other. The sunlight spilled through my kitchen window, touching the white lace curtains that I had stitched myself 20 years ago. The kettle whistled softly on the stove. Outside, the air smelled like snow. It was the kind of morning that made you want to wrap yourself in a blanket and remember that you're still alive. I remember stirring sugar into my tea, humming quietly. The Christmas decorations still hung on the walls, red ribbons, paper stars, and a tiny angel on the shelf. My hands were busy, but my mind was miles away, thinking of my son and his family. Mark had promised to visit that day with his wife Victoria and my granddaughter Olivia. They hadn't been around much lately, months, maybe more, but I always told myself they were busy. I wanted to believe that mothers always find a way to forgive absence, so I cooked their favorite meal, roasted chicken with rosemary, mashed potatoes, and a caramel pudding just like Mark used to ask for when he was little. I even wrapped gifts, a silk tie for Mark, a perfume for Victoria, and a silver locket for Olivia. I had engraved it myself, to Olivia, with love, Grandma. Hours passed. The food sat untouched. The tea went cold. The clock ticked louder than usual, each sound biting at my heart. Then, finally, I heard a car outside. My heart leaped. I fixed my hair, straightened my sweater, and opened the door. Mark stood there, tall, stiff, not smiling. Victoria stood beside him, her lips painted red, her eyes sharp and cold. And Olivia stayed in the car, tapping on her phone, barely noticing me. Come in, I said with a smile. It's freezing out there. But none of them moved. Victoria exchanged a look with Mark, then said, we won't stay long. Something in her voice, that calm, clipped tone, made me uneasy. Mark cleared his throat. Mom, there's something we need to talk about. My heart tightened. Talk, what's wrong? Victoria took over, as she always did. Evelyn, you can't keep living here alone. It's not safe, and it's not practical. You've had health issues. You're not young anymore. Mark and I have discussed it. We're moving you into a care facility. For a moment, I thought it was a joke. A care facility, you mean? One of those homes? She nodded, crossing her arms. Yes, we've already arranged everything. You'll have your own room, meals, medical care. It's best for everyone. I felt my throat close. But this is my home. Mark avoided my eyes. Mom, please understand. The house is too big for you. We'll take care of it. I frowned. Take care of it? What do you mean? Victoria sighed, as if she were tired of explaining. The paperwork is already in process. The house is being transferred to our name. It's simpler this way. You won't have to worry about bills anymore. The room went quiet. I stared at them, feeling the ground shift beneath me. You're taking my house. Mark ran a hand through his hair. It's for your own good, Mom. For my own good. I whispered. Mark, your father built this house with his bare hands. Every wall, every floorboard, every memory, it's all we had left of him. And you're just taking it. He looked away. It's just a house. Just a house. Those 3 words hit me harder than anything in my life. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to ask what had happened to the little boy who once promised never to leave me alone. But instead, I stood frozen. Victoria's tones softened falsely. Evelyn, please don't make this harder than it has to be. You'll be comfortable where we're sending you. Everything's already arranged. I looked at her, this woman who had turned my son into a stranger, and I felt something inside me break. I don't want your arrangements, I said quietly. I just wanted my family. But they were already leaving. Mark kissed my forehead. Mechanical, emotionless. It's for the best, Mom. Victoria turned away, already on her phone, and Olivia never even looked up. I stood at the door long after their car disappeared into the snow. The cold wind bit my face, but I barely felt it. Inside, the house felt different, hollow, echoing with memories that no longer belonged to me. That night, I sat in silence. The clock ticked, the fire burned low, and somewhere in the middle of that silence, my chest tightened. A sharp pain spread across my arm, my breath caught, and the world went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital bed. Machines beeped beside me. A nurse smiled gently and said, "You had a heart attack. You're lucky to be alive." Lucky. I spent 10 days there. 10 long days waiting for my son to call, to visit, to show that I still mattered. But the phone never rang. No one came, not even a message. The nurse would come in each morning and ask any family to contact, and every time, I just shook my head. After I was discharged, I went home, or what used to be home, except it wasn't mine anymore. When I turned the key, it didn't fit. A young woman opened the door. She looked confused. "Can I help you?" "This is my house," I said. She shook her head. "I just bought it last week." For a second, I couldn't breathe. The walls, the porch, the garden, everything that was once mine had been erased. I walked away slowly, carrying nothing but a small bag of clothes and a folder of hospital papers. That night, I slept in a shelter. The woman there gave me soup and a blanket. When I lay down, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, maybe this is how stories end quietly, without anyone noticing. But I was wrong, because some endings are only the beginning. That night, as I stared into the dark, a strange calm filled me. The pain didn't fade, but it turned into something else, something colder, sharper, and stronger. I thought of Mark's face, of Victoria's smug smile, of Olivia's indifference, and I realized something. People like them never expect consequences. They believe kindness is weakness, that silence means defeat. But I wasn't defeated. I was waiting, waiting for the right time, the right way, the right moment to remind them what betrayal costs. But because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't loud or cruel, it's quiet, steady, and perfectly timed, and when it finally comes, it doesn't shout, it whispers. So I whispered to myself that night, they took my home, my peace, my name, but they forgot one thing: I'm still alive. The morning after I lost everything, I woke up to the sound of rain against the shelter window. It was soft, steady, almost comforting. I sat up slowly, the thin blanket falling from my shoulders. My chest still ached from the surgery, but the pain inside, that was something no medicine could touch. A kind volunteer named Rosa brought me a cup of tea. "Rough night?" she asked softly. I nodded, just trying to remember where I belonged. Rosa smiled with sympathy. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find where you're meant to be." Her words stayed with me long after she left. For the first time in my life, I had nowhere to go, no home, no family, no one waiting for me. My son, my only son, had taken everything and walked away as if I were a stranger. The thought made my stomach twist, but I kept reminding myself, pain has a purpose if you let it teach you. And so, I decided that my pain would teach me how to start again. Over the next few weeks, I took small steps. I found a part-time job at a small library on the edge of town. It wasn't much, mostly shelving books and helping children pick out stories, but the smell of old pages, the quiet hum of people reading it gave me peace. Books have a strange way of healing you. They whisper that even in stories, the characters suffer before they rise again. Maybe I was just in the middle of mine. One afternoon, while sorting through donations, I found a worn-out book titled The Power of the Comeback. It wasn't new or fancy, but something about the title pulled me in. I opened it, and the first line read, "Sometimes life buries you, not to end you, but to plant you." That line changed something in me. That evening, as I sat by the window of the shelter, watching the city lights flicker through the rain, I said it out loud to myself. They buried me alive, but they forgot I'm a seed. Months passed. My health improved. I saved a little money from my job and rented a small apartment. Nothing like my old home, but it was mine. The walls were plain, the furniture old, but it was peaceful. One Sunday morning, I was sipping tea when the local newspaper caught my eye. On the front page was a photo of a smiling couple, Mark and Victoria. The headline read, "Young entrepreneurs launch real estate empire. Couple expands business across the city." My hand trembled slightly as I read. So that was their plan. They didn't just steal my home, they sold it, along with others, flipping old houses for profit. My home was just one transaction in their world of greed. I stared at their photo for a long time, Victoria, in her designer dress, and Mark, looking proud beside her, the son I once rocked to, sleep now standing beside the woman who had destroyed everything good in him, and something inside me hardened. That was the day I stopped crying. If life was going to make me invisible, I would use that invisibility to my advantage. Weeks later, I walked into a community event where local businesses were gathering. My library manager had invited me to represent our reading program, and I went, dressed neatly in a pale blue cardigan, and my best pair of shoes. As I entered, my eyes froze. Across the room stood Mark and Victoria. They were surrounded by people, shaking hands, smiling for photos. Victoria held a champagne glass, her laughter echoing through the hall. My heart pounded, but my face remained calm. I picked up a brochure from their booth. It read, Evergreen Estates, turning houses into homes. The irony almost made me laugh. Turning houses into homes. After stealing mine, I slipped the brochure into my purse and quietly left. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I sat up late, reading everything I could about their business, their website, their investors, their contacts. I studied them the way a teacher studies her most troublesome student. And slowly, a plan began to take shape. I wasn't rich, I wasn't powerful, but I had something they didn't: time, patience, and the truth. It started with small steps. I volunteered at charity events, the same ones their company donated to for publicity. One listened, observed, and asked harmless questions. I learned that Victoria's biggest project, a luxury housing complex, was facing delays. Investors were restless. Deadlines were tight. She needed new funding fast. And then fate stepped in. One day at the library, I met an elderly gentleman named Mr. Harrison. He came in often, quiet and polite, always asking for historical books. Over time, we became friends. One afternoon, as we chatted over coffee, I learned that he was a retired lawyer and still handled a few investments. "You've got a sharp mind, Evelyn," he said once. "Ever thought of going into consulting? You'd be good with property management." I smiled faintly. "I used to manage something my home, until someone took it." He raised an eyebrow. "Someone took your house?" So I told him, not everything, but enough. Enough for him to see the steel behind my calmness. He leaned back, thoughtful. "That's cruel, but sometimes karma needs a little help." That day, we talked for hours. He asked about my son, the paperwork, the sale, everything. By the end, he looked at me and said, "If what you're telling me is true, they might have broken more than your heart. They might have broken the law." It was the first time I felt hope in months. Mr. Harrison helped me go through the documents. He discovered that the property transfer had been done while I was in the hospital, during my surgery. My signatures had been forged. I stared at the paper in disbelief. "She forged my name." He nodded. "And your son signed as a witness. That makes it even worse." I gripped the edge of the table. The betrayal cut deeper than before. But this time, I didn't cry. I smiled, a slow, quiet smile. "Then it's time," I whispered. "Time for what?" he asked. "For them to meet karma." We began working quietly. Harrison helped me contact the right people, officials, lawyers, even a few journalists who were curious about corruption in the housing market. But I didn't want to ruin them instantly. No, that would be too easy. I wanted them to feel the ground shift beneath their feet the way they had done to me. I attended their public events in the background, unnoticed, blending in with the crowd. I watched Victoria charm investors and Mark pretend to be proud of his achievements. And I noticed something interesting. Victoria was in charge of everything. Mark followed her lead like a shadow. She controlled their empire. And he was simply the face she used when she needed sympathy. My son was gone, replaced by greed. One evening, I stood across the street from one of their new buildings, watching workers rush to meet deadlines. My reflection appeared faintly in the glass window of a cafe beside me, gray hair tied neatly, a calm face hiding years of pain. And that's when I whispered, "You took everything from me, but you forgot who taught you how to stand." That night, I pulled out my old wedding photo, the one of me, my husband, and little Mark standing in front of our home. I traced the outlines with my fingers, then folded it carefully and slipped it into my purse, because I knew the next time I saw my son, it wouldn't be as a mother, it would be as the woman who came to collect what she was owed. Weeks later, I received an invitation in the mail. It was from Olivia, my granddaughter. She was getting married. The card read, "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Olivia and Andrew, at Rosewood Hall, this Saturday." For a moment, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After everything they'd done, after stealing my home and erasing me from their lives, they still sent me an invitation. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe just vanity, wanting to look good in front of others, but something in me shifted again. This was it, the perfect stage, the day I'd been waiting for. Because karma, I realized, doesn't always knock on your door quietly. Sometimes, it arrives dressed in lace and flowers, right in the middle of a wedding. And when it does, It makes sure everyone's watching. I held the wedding invitation in my hands for a long time that night. The golden letters shimmered under the lamplight, mocking me like ghosts of the past. You are cordially invited. Cordially, after everything they'd done. It was strange. My heart didn't ache anymore. The sadness had burned itself out long ago, leaving behind something steadier, sharper. A kind of peace that only comes after you stop expecting people to change. I ran my thumb along the edge of the card and whispered, "You wanted me gone, but you're the one who just opened the door again." The next morning, I visited Mr. Harrison. His office smelled of leather and coffee, the kind of room that carried quiet power. When I handed him the invitation, his brow arched. "So," he said slowly, "they want you at the wedding." "Yes," I replied calmly, "and I'll go." He studied my face. "To make peace." I met his eyes with a faint smile. "No, to make history." He chuckled softly, though I could tell he was worried. "Just be careful, Evelyn. Revenge is sweet, but it can burn the hand that holds it." I smiled faintly. "Oh, Mr. Harrison, I'm not going to burn anything. I'm just going to let the truth shine a little light." That entire week felt like the calm before a storm. Every night, I replayed memories in my mind, like old film reels. Mark, as a boy, building Lego houses on the living room floor. His laughter echoing down the hallway. The way he used to hug me after dinner and say, "You're the best mom ever." Where did that boy go? When did he trade love for money? I tried to remember the exact moment I lost him, but I couldn't. Maybe I hadn't lost him all at once. Maybe it happened piece by piece. Every time Victoria whispered something poisonous into his ear. By Friday night, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to the wedding as a broken old woman. I was going as a storm that had finally learned how to be silent before it struck. The morning of the wedding arrived cold and misty, the kind of morning that carried both promise and warning. I stood in front of the mirror in my small apartment, brushing my silver hair into a neat bun. My reflection stared back at me, calm, dignified, but with a glint in her eyes that even time couldn't dim. I wore a pale blue dress with a matching shawl, simple but elegant. It wasn't about looking grand, it was about showing up before leaving. I reached for a small velvet pouch on the table. Inside were the papers Mr. Harrison and I had prepared, documents, signatures, and proof that my house had been stolen through forgery. The truth, sealed and ready. I slipped the pouch into my purse and whispered, "Let's go get what's ours." Rosewood Hall was breathtaking. White roses lined the aisle, crystal chandeliers sparkled from the ceiling, and a live string quartet played soft music. Guests filled the rows, chatting and laughing, dressed in shimmering gowns and crisp suits, and there, at the center of it all, stood Victoria, radiant in her gold dress, barking orders at the wedding planner as if she were directing a movie instead of her stepdaughter's wedding. When she saw me, her smile froze. "Evelyn," she said slowly, her voice dripping with fake warmth. "You came." I smiled. "You invited me." Her lips twitched. "I didn't think you'd actually show up." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I said, meeting her eyes. Behind her, I saw Mark, my son, adjusting his tie, avoiding my gaze. He looked uncomfortable, as if my presence had ruined his perfect show. I wanted to reach out, to shake him, to ask, "Why, Mark?" But I didn't. I simply gave him a nod and said softly, "You look well." He mumbled something polite, his eyes darting away. Victoria quickly stepped between us, her smile tightening. "Enjoy the ceremony, Evelyn. There's a seat in the back." I smiled faintly. "Don't worry, dear. I'll find my place." And oh, I did. As the ceremony began, the hall filled with music and soft candlelight. The bride, Olivia, walked down the aisle, looking beautiful, nervous, and innocent, the only one in that family who hadn't lost her heart to greed. Watching her, I felt a pang of sorrow. She didn't deserve what was coming, but sometimes, the innocent witnessed the storm to understand the cost of betrayal. The vows were said, the rings exchanged, and applause echoed through the hall. Everyone rose to their feet, smiling and clapping. Everyone, except me. I stayed seated, calm, still, waiting, because I knew the real ceremony hadn't even begun yet. The reception was grand, a ballroom glittering with chandeliers, laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. I moved quietly between guests, unnoticed. People were too busy celebrating to see the old woman in the corner. At the center table, Mark and Victoria basked in the glow of attention, surrounded by businessmen and investors. They looked untouchable, perfect, powerful, adored. But beneath all that shine, I saw cracks forming. An investor leaned in to Victoria and whispered something. She smiled too quickly. Mark's hand tightened around his glass. There was tension there, cracks waiting for the right pressure. And I was under pressure. When the microphone was passed around for the family to give their blessings, I saw my moment. Victoria's smile faltered when the host said, "Would the bride's grandmother like to say a few words?" A hush fell over the room as I slowly rose from my seat. My shawl slipped slightly off my shoulders, and I adjusted it gracefully before walking toward the stage. Mark whispered something to Victoria, but she just stared, her expression tight. I reached the microphone, my hand steady. "I'm not very good with speeches," I began, my voice calm but carrying through the room. "But I do believe in blessings and in truth, because a blessing that hides the truth isn't a blessing at all." A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. Victoria shifted uncomfortably. Mark looked pale. I smiled gently. "You see, this family once taught me a painful lesson about trust, and how easily love can be traded for greed." I reached into my purse and placed the velvet pouch on the table beside me. "But sometimes," I continued, "life gives you a chance to return the favor, not with hatred, but with justice." I pulled out the documents, signed papers, proof, and the photo of my house before it was sold. "This house," I said, holding up the photo, "was my home for 40 years. It was stolen from me while I lay unconscious in surgery. My signature was forged. My son's name is written as a witness." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Cameras turned, phones came out. Victoria shot up from her chair. "This is ridiculous. She's lying, am I?" I interrupted, turning to the guests. "Because these documents were verified by my lawyer, Mr. Harrison, who happens to be here tonight." Mr. Harrison, standing at the back, gave a small nod. The crowd erupted in whispers. Mark's face turned white. "Mom, stop please." I looked at him, and for the first time, my voice broke just a little. "You stopped calling me Mom the day you signed my name without my hand. But don't worry, son. I forgive you, because karma doesn't." The silence that followed was heavy, electric. Every eye in that hall was on them, on her, on him. I stepped back from the microphone, my heart steady. "Congratulations on your new life," I said softly. "I just thought you should start it with the truth." And with that, I walked away slow calm, each step echoing like thunder in their perfect little world. Behind me, I could hear the chaos begin, voices raised, chairs scraping, Victoria shouting about lies, Mark trying to calm her, reporters swarming in. But I didn't turn around. For once, I didn't need to look back, because karma had already arrived. And it was beautiful as days passed. The house that once echoed with laughter now stood silent, except for the ticking of the clock that seemed to remind Eleanor of every betrayal she'd endured. She wandered through the empty halls, her heart aching as she glanced at the photographs, her late husband's smile, her children's faces as toddlers. Those walls held memories, not just bricks. And now, her own family wanted to erase her from it. One afternoon, while sorting through old documents in her bedroom drawer, Eleanor found something unexpected, a deed paper that had her late husband's signature. Her hands trembled. The document clearly stated the house could not be transferred or sold without her written consent. Her eyes widened. This meant that the papers William and his wife, Vanessa, had forced her to sign were illegal. Her heart pounded with anger and renewed strength. For the first time since her surgery, Eleanor stood taller. "So this is how they played their game," she murmured, her voice trembling with both fury and determination. She made a call to an old friend, Mr. Raymond Cole, her late husband's lawyer, and a man who had always respected Eleanor like family. When he arrived, she showed him the deed. He adjusted his glasses, scanning every line carefully, and then looked up at her. "Eleanor," he said firmly, "they tricked you. What they've done is fraud. If we move carefully, we can make them pay legally and publicly." A spark ignited in her heart. For so long, she'd been a victim, a frail grandmother, discarded by those she loved most. But now, she was going to fight back, not with anger or chaos, but with justice. For the next few weeks, Eleanor quietly worked with Mr. Cole, gathered medical reports proving she was under anesthesia when the documents were supposedly signed. She collected statements from neighbors who had seen William moving furniture out while she was still recovering in the hospital. Slowly, her case built strength. Meanwhile, William and Vanessa were busy preparing for their grand wedding anniversary celebration, the event where they planned to show off their new home. Invitations went out, photos of the renovated house flooded social media, and friends congratulated them on their beautiful property. Eleanor saw it all, every post cutting her heart a little deeper, but she didn't comment, she didn't argue, she simply whispered, "Enjoy it while you can, my dear children. Karma always keeps its promises." Then, on the night before their wedding celebration, Mr. Cole called her with a calm but powerful tone. "Eleanor, everything is ready. You'll have your chance to speak tomorrow. Just be there, and let me handle the rest." She looked out her window that night, the moonlight casting a soft glow over the garden she had planted decades ago. Her husband's voice echoed in her memory. "Never let anyone take your peace, Ellie, not even family." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but this time, they weren't from pain, they were from power. Tomorrow, she would walk into that celebration not as a forgotten grandmother, but as a storm no one saw coming. The sun rose that morning with a strange stillness in the air, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Eleanor woke early, her heart calm but determined. She dressed slowly, choosing the same soft lavender dress she had worn on her 50th wedding anniversary, the one her husband had loved. She looked in the mirror and whispered, "This is for us." Across town, the grand wedding venue buzzed with excitement. Music echoed, waiters hurried with trays of champagne, and guests filled the beautifully decorated hall. William and Vanessa looked radiant, perfect smiles hiding the truth. They stood under a glittering chandelier, greeting guests and boasting about their home, their success, their perfect life. But soon, perfection would shatter. As the ceremony reached its height, the host announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, before we move to the toasts, we have a special guest who wishes to share a few words." The room fell quiet as Eleanor stepped inside. Heads turned. The whispers began instantly. "Is that William's mother? She looks so frail. What's she doing here?" Vanessa's smile froze, her face draining of color. William stiffened, his jaw clenching. Eleanor walked forward slowly, her steps steady. The sound of her heels echoed in the hall. Click, 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 like a heartbeat counting down to truth. She reached the center, turned to face the crowd, and took a deep breath. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice calm yet commanding. "I'm Eleanor Hayes, William's mother. I wasn't invited today, but I came because this," she gestured around the lavish decorations, "used to be my home." A ripple went through the crowd. Gasps, murmurs. All eyes shifted to William and Vanessa. Eleanor continued, her voice trembling with controlled pain. "While I was fighting for my life in surgery, my son and his wife sold my home, without my knowledge, without my consent. The house my husband and I built together, brick by brick, dream by dream." Vanessa tried to interrupt, "That's not true." But before she could finish, Mr. Cole stood up from a nearby table, holding a folder. "Actually, it is." His voice cut through the air like a blade. "I'm Eleanor's attorney. I have every document proving this transaction was fraudulent, including hospital records showing she was under anesthesia when these so-called sale papers were signed." The crowd gasped again. Cameras started flashing. Guests whispered louder now. "They did what?" "Her own son." William's face turned pale. "Mom, please, we can talk about this." Eleanor raised a hand. "No, William, you talked enough when you lied. You told everyone I was fine with it, that I wanted to live quietly in a small apartment, but you forgot one thing. Truth has a way of coming home." The hall fell silent. Even the music stopped. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her son. "I gave you everything, and you sold my memories for money." Her voice cracked, but she stood firm. "But today, I take back my dignity." Mr. Cole handed copies of the legal documents to the event manager and a few guests. "The property transfer has been revoked. Ownership returns to Mrs. Eleanor Hayes. The court order was signed this morning." The audience erupted. Shock, whispers, judgment. Vanessa stumbled backward, humiliated. William buried his face in his hands. Eleanor looked at them one last time. "You both stole from me while I was dying. But now, you'll live with what you've done, in public, forever." Then she turned, walking away slowly, her back straight, her eyes wet but fierce. The crowd parted silently for her, no one daring to stop her. As she reached the door, she paused and looked back just once. "You see, karma doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it walks in wearing pearls." And with that, Eleanor left the hall, leaving behind gasps, shame, and the echo of justice well served. The next morning, sunlight filtered through lace curtains, falling softly on the freshly polished wooden floors of Eleanor's reclaimed home. For the first time in years, it felt like hers again, not just a house, but a memory restored. The scent of lilies filled the room. A kind neighbor had dropped them off that morning, saying, You deserve peace now, Mrs. Hayes. Eleanor stood in the middle of her living room, fingertips brushing the framed photographs on the mantel. Her husband's smile, her son as a boy, holding his first school trophy, a family once whole before greed and pride tore it apart. She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. You were right, Robert, she whispered to her late husband's portrait. The truth always finds its way home. After the dramatic confrontation at the wedding, the story spread through town like wildfire. Local newspapers ran headlines: Mother reclaims home after son's betrayal. Wedding turns to courtroom drama. Family secrets exposed. People she hadn't seen in years began reaching out. Old friends, neighbors, even distant relatives. Some offered sympathy, others whispered apologies for believing the lies. But Eleanor didn't seek pity. She wanted silence, healing, and to rebuild her life on her own terms. One afternoon, as she sat on the porch sipping tea, her lawyer, Mr. Cole, arrived with a gentle smile. You did well, Eleanor. Most people would have given up. She smiled faintly. Giving up was never an option. It was never about revenge. It was about dignity. He nodded. And you've earned it back. They sat quietly for a moment, listening to the wind rustle the trees. Then, Mr. Cole handed her an envelope. What's this? She asked. He grinned. A job offer from the same real estate firm your son worked for. They want you as a senior consultant, someone to teach their younger agents about ethics and integrity. Eleanor laughed softly, a sound that carried both irony and grace. Life does have a way of coming full circle, doesn't it? She took the job not because she needed the money, but because she wanted to turn her pain into wisdom. Within months, she became known in the company as Mrs. Hayes, the heart of the office. Her gentle yet firm nature guided the younger staff. She shared her experiences without bitterness, often saying, you can rebuild anything except trust, so guard it well. And then, one chilly December morning, as the office prepared for the holiday season, a familiar name appeared on the applicant list: William Hayes. Eleanor froze for a moment. The same son who betrayed her was now applying for a job under her supervision. Her staff noticed the flicker in her eyes, but she quickly composed herself. Later that week, the door opened, and William walked in. He looked tired, older, defeated. Vanessa wasn't with him. Rumors said their marriage had crumbled under the weight of public shame. Mom, he began, his voice trembling. Eleanor looked up from her desk.com and collected, Mr. Hayes, please have a seat. He hesitated. Mom, I'm not your mother right now, she interrupted softly. I'm your potential employer. Tell me why you're here. William swallowed hard, eyes glistening. Because I lost everything. The house, the job, Vanessa. I don't even have the strength to pretend anymore. I just need a chance. Eleanor studied him for a long moment, not with hatred, but with the quiet understanding of someone who has already won. You know, William, she said finally, a second chance isn't something you ask for. It's something you earn. Tears welled in his eyes. Please, I'm sorry. She looked at him, her voice steady. I forgave you long ago. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. You'll work here under supervision, not because you're my son, but because everyone deserves a lesson in humility. William nodded, tears falling freely now. Thank you, Mom. Eleanor sighed gently. Don't thank me. Thank the karma that brought you here. As he left her office, Eleanor leaned back in her chair, exhaling deeply. It wasn't satisfaction she felt, it was peace, the kind of peace that comes only after a storm. That evening, she stood outside her home again, watching the golden lights spill across the porch. The wind whispered through the garden, carrying echoes of the past and promises of tomorrow. She smiled faintly and whispered, It's over now. Inside, the clock ticked softly. The same clock that once measured years of grief now marked the start of something new. A quiet, beautiful ending. And somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed. Christmas was coming again. But this time, Eleanor wasn't alone. She had her home, her strengths, and her peace back. And maybe that was the sweetest revenge of all. My dear ones, if you felt my pain and my strength, please tap that like button and subscribe to join our family. There's always another story waiting, one that might change how you see life.